This is going to be a different video from my study art books. This is going to be more things that inspire me, art books that I like to look through, even some like prose books, like written word books that I really like to read or go back to for inspiration, or things that have really like struck me with inspiration. So this is more of a fun little video, and not much to like glean from studying, but it is good to study from things that inspire you. So let's get right into it. The first book that I have is actually The World of Mucha. So this is Alphonse Mucha's art, and this is actually my partner Kel's. This is his book. So we like to look through these kinds of books, and this is written in Japanese. So this is actually, it's written in Japanese and English, but it's a Japanese publication. But you can just look through the pictures, and like sometimes we annotate things because we like the way certain things look. But you know, Alphonse Mucha had a moment. I remember on DeviantArt, a lot of people would, like, this is way back, but like when I was more active on DeviantArt, like back in like maybe 2015 or so, maybe 2010, even 2009, a lot of people took influence from Mucha because there was an explosion of like his work. I don't know, but like he did a lot of advertising. He did a lot of advertisement illustrations and things like that. Like you'll see like storybooks, illustrations, and treatments for like short stories and mythology, a lot of mythology in here actually. But yeah, like I love how his art is, it's Art Nouveau, right? So his art is very, like, it has a lot of flow. It has a lot of like really strong flow. Like you can see how strong the direction of the illustrations are in his work. I personally really like his pencils and his sketches. His color stuff is really, really nice. You can tell that he has a method for a lot of his works that are done in color, and where it should go, and the fonts that he uses. I like all the poses of the figures that he draws. They all look very ethereal. If there's a word for his art, I would say it's very ethereal. Yeah, this is it's like a treasure trove of like his work. And there's another book by this same publisher that I would like to get, of patterns by, so William Morris is the name of that artist that I'm referring to, that has another publication from these guys. It's just a bunch of his, like a side note, the same publication that made this Alphonse Mucha book made another one from William Morris, and he made the patterns like that look like this. Actually, I think this is a William Morris derivative washi tape, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. I want another book by these guys, and I do like that you can really see the details in this book. The way that it's sized and the way that the pictures are laid out are nice. I like it. Gosh, I love the way Mucha does light, color and light too. You could see his style is very graphic, but also very painterly, which is something that I really want to achieve in my work, because my work is not very painterly or textural. It's more graphic. It's got more line involved in it. So the way that Mucha does line work and marries it with the color work, the lines are so clean. I really like that. My lines are not as clean, and that's okay. I don't think I need everything to be super symmetrical. And even if you look at some of his work, you can see that since it's all done by hand, and obviously there was no Photoshop back then, you can see how even like some of these details here are not perfectly symmetrical, but it works because you're so sucked in by the rest of the picture that it doesn't matter. You don't have to nitpick. So I'm telling you, artists, right now, you don't have to be perfectly symmetrical or perfect for every little thing to draw good art. So the next up on my list, and this is my book, is J.C. Leyendecker. So I love this guy. He's one of my favorite all-time inspirations. He also does a lot of advertising, or he did a lot of advertising for, he did a lot of work for Arrow Collars, a lot of like clothing for men, menswear. He also did the Saturday Evening Post. You might know Norman Rockwell. He's one of his contemporaries, but Leyendecker, well, he's a lot more known now because a lot of people are acknowledging his work recently. But Norman Rockwell came after J.C. Leyendecker. Leyendecker was like the first, he was not the first, but he was like before Rockwell, and a lot of his work was done just in his studio, and he did a lot of covers for the Saturday Evening Post, as you can see here, and I just really like his compositions. I love the way that he paints so graphically. Like, if I can combine Muka's line work with Leyendecker's, like, with his color and like his shading and like the way that he blocks out all of his shadows and light, I feel like I would be golden. I just need to look at his stuff more. But I do take out this book quite often. I have a bookmark in here for, what did I bookmark in here actually? Oh, it was his method actually, for how he composes and applies paint to his work. Just basically his process. He just straight tells you how he does these things. So the pages are beautiful. I do wish that some of these were bigger, but that would mean that you would have to have more pages, and that would cost more money, obviously. So you can't get every single one of his images in here because he did so many pieces for the Saturday Evening Post. You can't possibly put so many like pages for just a singular illustration, but he did a lot. Especially in the early 1900s, especially during like the wars and whatnot, a lot of patriotic stuff. Now, a lot of people, not a lot of artists, but a lot of like other people who are not artists, will be like, oh, who's Leyendecker? I'm like, okay, do you know Norman Rockwell, who did all the like Americana art? And they're like, yeah, I'm like, that's the guy before him. And I would say like, I like Rockwell's work a whole lot too. But Rockwell's work is a lot more timely, I think. Not that that's a bad thing. It's very Americana, but I find that when Leyendecker's not doing like Saturday Evening Post stuff, his stuff is a lot more timeless. I don't know how to describe it, but also a lot of his advertising work is also very, very sleek. I really like it, and I really highly recommend this book. Even though a lot of the images can be very like zoomed out, you can still get a lot of the detail and how he like laid his paint strokes, and I really like that. I like stuff like this. I redrew this at one point or another with just my characters in it, and it was a pretty cool study. I did it digitally, and I think I did it traditionally too with like gouache or something, but the majority of his work is oil, so I am so afraid of oil painting. But anyway, that's Leyendecker and his influences. Now, the thing about Muka and Leyendecker that I do want to cover really quickly is that there are things that I really, really like about these artists, and there are things that I don't want to pick up from these artists. And the number one thing that I can tell you that I don't want to pick up from Leyendecker and Muka are the compositions of their work read very advertisement, and that's not necessarily what I want for my own work. It's very laid out in such a way that it's like, you know, it's an ad, or it's like a vignette for an ad, or showcasing a certain item or something like that. It's very straight on, with a lot of, like, you see this here, it's like, this is obviously an ad for Arrow Collars, right? So like, that's kind of the stuff that I kind of want to stay away from. Even with Muka's work, a lot of it is like, oh, well, here's like a absinthe, you know, like here's an ad for a drink, or, you know, like the person's clearly holding a drink. And that's kind of what I used to want from like my more finished illustrations, is kind of what I used to want. But nowadays I think I want more of a storytelling element in my single illustrations than something that looks kind of like an ad, or like a pinup ad, or something like that. So I will take certain elements of the techniques, but maybe not necessarily the compositions all the time, even though the compositions are very strong and very set. even in my last video with creative illustration, a lot of those illustrations and compositions are really, really good for advertising. But for storytelling, I mean, advertisements do have to tell a story, but I think it's so important to, even when you really like artists, like an artist's work, take what you want from it, but also take note of what you don't want to pick up from them, because then you have a limit, and then you can like kind of explore what you actually like about your own work and what elements you do want to implement and what you want to avoid. So next is, now this book is not a book that I see a whole lot of other folks having in their collection, but I'm really drawn to the color and the graphic design of this artist. His name was Maxfield Parrish, and I honestly can tell you that he also did a lot of advertising. The majority of people in this era, illustrators who did like art like this, did advertisements, basically. That was their line of work. That was the most common way for an illustrator to have a steady line of work before photography really got popular and more common. They would do a lot of this stuff. So what draws me to Maxfield Parrish's work is his use of glazing and color. So in one of these pages, it explains his method, but it looks like, you know what it looks like to me? Do you know the movie Never Ending Story and that very 80s fantasy vibe of kind of like this blown out ethereal like settings and whatnot? That's what his art reminds me of. And I wouldn't doubt if that was like, if Maxfield Parrish was some of the influence for a lot of the like work done, like fantasy art done in the 80s. But like, his method was he would glaze several layers of color over and over and over again for most of his work. Some of it, this is, wow, Harper's Bazaar, that's how old that is. But like some of his work was very, like you see, he does like normal illustrations too. He did a lot of like, advertising, like I said, but stuff like this, it's so ethereal. I can't take my eyes off of it. I love the colors, and a lot of it is like you see there's an overlay, there's an overarching color scheme, an overarching palette, but you can see the luminosity of his work, which I really, really like. Granted, I have not read this book to extension, but so I don't know much about him, actually. But I was drawn to his work in another context that I forget. And I've seen his work before, I just didn't know his name beforehand. I do know that he's, I believe, Pennsylvanian. And so, yeah, like his work is really good, especially like his, like, it looks like it's Photoshopped. It looks like it's photo bash, but it's not. It's not. It's him, like, just illustrating and then taking those illustrations and glazing over paint, several layers of paint, and making it that, giving it that kind of glow, those soft edges, and I really, really like it. I just love it. So yeah, that's Maxfield Parrish. There's not much I can actually say about him. You just have to look at his work to like kind of see what I'm talking about. It's very much what I like in what I want to implement in my work, is like this kind of luminous glow. So I look through this book every so often just to refresh my eyes on like his work and how he did it. So these next two books are going to be art books that I really like. I got these two at Kinokuniya. So we have Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward. We also have the Shadowbringers art book, but Heavensward is my favorite expansion. It was the first one I got attached to at the very least, so I really like Heavensward. I like all the concepts. There's a lot of really good art in here. Like I said, I got this from Kinokuniya, which is a Japanese bookstore, and they have a few other chains in the United States, but they had these art books, and I just couldn't pass them up, because when else would I buy them? And I wouldn't go looking for this. So they have different illustrations of attire, concepts for weapons, different like jobs, like for the different job classes. And these are mostly concepts, but a lot of the stuff you can see at least echoes of it in glams and different pieces of clothing and armor and gear in the game. So I find that to be really cool. I love Final Fantasy XIV. I love all the unique and creative weaponry. I am not somebody that draws weaponry a whole lot, so I would never draw something this elaborate, but I admire, like, sometimes you just gotta go through an art book and just go, damn. Like, you just gotta, like, enjoy it, man. Just enjoy, like, looking at it and soaking it in. Even though you don't draw stuff, you might not draw stuff like this. Right? They also have creatures and dragons and things like that. And I love it all. Monsters. And they have, like, scenes that you can see some of these in, like, loading screens, actually, when Final Fantasy XIV is loading up. And you have like different props, prop design, settings. A lot of this is Ishgard. And I just love stuff like this. The reason why I like Heavensward is because I like that Gothic architecture. I'm practicing drawing that because I have a lot of thematic sort of scenes in my comic for that specifically. So sometimes I'll come here and I'll look at things and kind of get the gist of how it might be drawn. It's one thing to look at like a picture of maybe like a cathedral, and it's another to see what the heck is going on here, like what the artist was thinking when they were looking at their own reference. And it's really interesting and really, really freaking cool. This is the Holy See of Ishgard here, and you can see this really far away from a distance. And it's just so interesting. I just love stuff like this. But yeah, this is the Heavensward Art of Ishgard art book, and I highly recommend it because it's a treat. It's a real treat. The next book is a little more nostalgic for me. So this is The Art of Mana from the Secret of Mana Seiken Densetsu series, my beloved. I love the art of this book. And now what I will tell you, okay, I've set this up. What I will tell you now is that I can see a lot of influence from this art from Maxfield Parrish. And let me tell you why. The detail and the glow of a lot of this, and maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of the detail and the glow from a lot of these illustrations, like all this lush, really like soft to no edge type of, like it's just so much to look at, you know. And look at this. I know I'm having a hard time explaining myself, but I love lush colors. This is from Trials of Mana. Now, Seiken Densetsu 3 is the game that I used to play translated on an emulator, and I love that game to death, and it's the only way I was able to play it for the longest time before they finally released it as Trials of Mana here stateside. And I was just overjoyed. I just had to have the game and I had to play it. And I remember this piece of art, and for the longest time a lot of this art was not even like known or released. I love how cute this is. I love early stage or beginning, the first few like iterations of like art for like NES and SNES games because you have to keep it simple, and as a result everything is chibi. So I love that about that. And these are okay, so this is from the 1999. I would have never seen this before this like book or much of anywhere on the internet. I love this to death, and a lot of this was like not even released, and they finally put it out. And when I saw all of this, I like almost cried because this game means a lot to me. Trials of Mana or Seiken Densetsu 3 means a lot to me, and a lot of these characters are really like really cool, and a lot of these were sprites that you could barely see. Like, you kind of squinted. Like, I know that these illustrations are really cool, but I cannot see a dang thing in these pixels. So, like, they finally, like, put it all in a book, and it's not just the Trials of Mana. It's actually all of the games up until like maybe the latest one, time of printing. And granted, I haven't played all the Mana games, but I do really love the art direction and the overall consistency of the fantasy element of Trials of Mana, or the Mana series. I love Flammy. She's the best. But yeah, like this was really instrumental in my influence for art. Even just playing the game. If you play the game, like the SNES version of Trials of Mana, all the settings, and even any Mana game really, all the settings are so lush, and like that's just what I love about this fantasy setting. I love fantasy settings, right? But like, you can't, it's just so, it's not even just a nostalgia, it's just the execution of how art used to be, like concept art and scenes from the game. It's just really, really good, and I really highly recommend. If you like the Mana series, I really recommend it. Even if you're not familiar with it, I still would say pick it up, because it's got a lot in here, and it's a really good book. And I also found this at Kinokuniya, and I couldn't just say no to it. So every time I go there, I feel like I gotta get something. So next up, I'm gonna show you is Witch Hat Atelier. This manga series, we're current. This manga series has been just such an influence, an inspiration, an absolute joy to read, and I recommend everybody read this series. This is by Shirahama Kamome. I really recommend this book. I recommend the manga. It's an allegory for art. Okay, like this whole series is an allegory for art, and it means a whole lot to me, because up until before I read this, I used to read a lot of manga when I was younger, but I stopped for a very, very long time, and I can't even remember how this came across my radar or if somebody recommended it to me, but I remember seeing it in a Barnes & Noble and going, you know what, I want to pick this up. I can't remember if Kel actually said, hey, I'm really interested in this. And I said, you know what, let's grab it. And oh my god, like, this has been my favorite manga for a very, very long time. I love the characters. I love Coco, she's the main character. I love all the characters, really. They're very likable. And it's so inspiring to see the lore, like, unfold in front of you. I'm not going to show too much of this comic because spoilers if you haven't read it, but like, one of the biggest reasons why I picked up a dip pen and ink is because of this manga. You can see, like, the way that she draws lines and the way that she suggests detail and where she uses darks and lights and midtones and textures, and like the atmosphere of this story is immaculate. Absolutely immaculate. I love this book. I love every detail about it, and I study from it a lot. I will pull this book out and I will do exercises just to see how Shirahama does her ink work. And I don't know, it's just something about it that is really, it's really built up my confidence in my line and my hand, so I feel like I'm more steady nowadays. And I know that I said in my last video, but like the art books that I study, those are really important things to me that I really focused in on trying to improve. And I feel like I did it by, yes, studying, but also observing masters and like how they actively work on things. So I really highly recommend this book. I recommend the story, not just the way it looks, but the story as well is really, really good. And yeah, Witch Hat Atelier. So the next 3 books are more honorable mentions. There are not books that have pictures in them, but they are books that I like and books that that influence me, inspire me. So the first one up is The Song of Achilles. Now, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, is one of my favorite books. This is like the 10th year like anniversary. I have like another one that's just the regular paperback, but I absolutely love the story. It's based on the Iliad, obviously, but it's told from Patroclus's perspective, and it's during the war. So it's during the war of Troy, and it's such a good story. I love stories that are told from the perspective of lesser known maybe characters and myth. So we know about Achilles, we know about Patroclus, but not as much. And he's telling it from the perspective of Achilles, or from the perspective of Patroclus. He's telling it from the perspective of himself, I'm trying to say, and how he sees Achilles and the things that they have done throughout their life together. And they are also lovers. And it's a tragic tale because if you know the Iliad, then you know how this ends. But the way that it is written is top tier. I love it. It's one of my favorite books. She also has another book called Circe that I also really, really like, and I highly recommend that one. And there are a couple of others not by her that are like myth retellings that I am not really that interested in, but I highly recommend, if you like that genre of story, that you go ahead and explore that type of story. For me, the stories can get kind of samey, especially if it's retellings of like mythological like people, but like I really like the way that this was executed, because this is one of my first foray into retelling of myths, and I think it's totally normal and totally fine to retell a story from myth, because that's what mythology is. It was an oral tradition, or oral stories and plays passed down, and they were changed over time. Things like belief systems and practices changed over time. Historically, land has changed. Kings and kingdoms have fallen and risen, and gods and goddesses get syncretized and changed and forgotten over time. So I think it's totally normal to like, and natural for a human to change up the story and tell it from a different perspective. So that is why I like these kinds of stories, and I loved Song of Achilles. It is my favorite because I like Greek myth. So yeah, highly recommend. Next up is Real Alchemy. This is a reference book on the practice of practical alchemy. And if you know me, you know that I love this subject to the moon and back. It is not an easy subject to get into. It's not just, I mean, like, if you watch Full Metal Alchemist, actually, you have a pretty good basis, like minus the fantasy elements, you have a pretty good basis of what alchemy is if you've watched Full Metal Alchemist. But I really liked the concept of putting it in my comic and having a little bit of that sci fantasy thing going on. But this is the practical practice of making spagyrics, which is basically herbal alchemy. So you would have like a very involved scientific chemical process that the herbs that you choose go through, and then they have to distill under certain planetary attributions, and it gets really, really like in the weeds. And you have like a lab where you do all this stuff, and so like I implemented all of that into my main character, and he is very, very much into this. So in order to make a comic about alchemy, I had to read about alchemy, and it turned out that I was very interested in it. So that is what this book is here for. I have more than one book on alchemy, but when I need to go back and kind of read about the history of alchemy and the major key players in like the practice of alchemy and the metaphor between practical and scientific and exoteric and esoteric, so to speak, because the lines are very blurred in alchemy. After all, it is a precursor to chemistry. It gets kind of windy and twisty and things like that, and that's what's great about alchemy. Like, you can kind of put whatever you want in it as long as it has a basis of, yeah, scientifically this could make sense in a fantasy setting. But I like this book a whole lot because I can go back to it and kind of like get a brief history, the theories, and like the practices and the different types of like oils and herbs and the process in which, there are pictures, what do you know? Alchemical illustrations are a trip, okay? I like, every time I see one, I'm like, what is going on? But anyway, Real Alchemy by Robert Allen Bartlett. Yeah, that's just, this has been on my bookshelf for like 10 years, and I love it. The next book is the Orphic Hymns. So these are hymns to different gods, and I did mention in my Meet the Artist video that I am a Hellenic polytheist, and I like to have hymns on hand, man. I just like to have them on hand, like, oh, I need a hymn to like Zeus or to Nike or to Melione or something like that, you know, to Pluton, Poseidon, Tyche, you know, like there's like, the Orphic hymns is kind of a complicated subject to me. They are, a lot of them have to do with the practice of the religion back in the day. So a lot of people, well, people back then would pray to different gods for different things, and they would give an offering. And a lot of these hymns are very short, very sweet, very simple, but it gives you a touch of the lore of these gods that might not have been known, because a lot of this has to do with mystery cults from antiquity, and a lot of it is like lost to time. And I just love reading the snippets of like hymns, and there's a lot of stuff to Dionysus, and there's a lot of subject of like death and rebirth, and a lot of theming like that. So sometimes I read this because I actually like to write hymns, and I like to implement them in different works when I'm drawing. And if I want to draw something a little bit more, I guess, oriented to mythology or oriented to a specific deity, I will reference Orphic hymns. Homeric hymns are also very, very good. I don't have a book on Homeric hymns yet, but I will get one. So yeah, that's that. I love Greek mythology, as you know, so I love like reading the words of the past. So, and the last book I will share with you today was a gift from my partner. So this is Botanical Curses and Poisons, The Shadow Lives of Plants. This has a counterpart that I also have. Let me show it to you really quick. Folk Magic and Healing, The Unusual History of Everyday Plants. So these two are reference books, and I really like them because they are illustrated explanations of different plants. I like this one a little better because I like poison plants. Not that I don't like this one, but they're by the same person, and Kel surprised me with these, and that they're an A to Z reference book, essentially, of different plants, and maybe some prose about them in history, from history, and maybe some like every plant, every herb has a myth, right? Or like a story to it, especially if they're poison plants that have killed people. So some of these come with very interesting stories. Like in here is oleander, somewhere in here is oleander, and there's a story about somebody making an oleander cake for someone, and I forget the details of the story, but like every plant has a story, and I love like the illustrations for each one. So it is an illustrated guide. It's just that I like to look at this because I like to look at the plant, what the plant could be used for, and then I like to like maybe do a little bit more of a deeper dive on that plant, like online. or read about it somewhere. But yeah, this is a really good book for plant reference if you like plants. It's a good starting point too. This is much the same layout. Oh, Deadly Nightshade is in here actually, but yeah, there's like different excerpts of different people who are writers or poets that had something to say about a specific plant, and we all have something to say about plants, right? Because they're great. Anyway, those are all my books and all my the books that inspire me. Like I said, I like to have physical books on hand because I like to flip through them. It gets my mind going. It keeps me off the screen. It keeps me undistracted. And I have many more books that I wish that if I could just share them all with you, I'd be here all day. This would be like a 5-hour video, and I don't think that you want that. I don't want that. So I'm giving you guys a glimpse into like kind of my collection that I've built up over time and that I like to pull from every so often. And that's why I'm kind of not online as often, because I'm always in the books. So if you guys like this video and you want to see another video like this, or if you had any questions about any of your books, or if you have any books that you like, whether or not they're like digital copies or anything like that, like please put those, please tell me what you like to look at, and we can talk about it, because I'm really interested in seeing what you guys like as well. I like to talk books. I love them so much. I always am reading. So I also have a couple of tarot decks if you guys want to see those. But in the meantime, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.